whatsoever. So we're gonna try it again. This time it's gonna be really random. Actually, no, not so random still. Because I have the pink eye. And I've been dealing with it. Now I'll be dealing with it in story. Lifting it up and hoping it'll give me a dispensation. That's all.
Welcome to Sunday. Go to meeting related where we press this button which produces a random fate, active or extinct, always real or eternally fictional. Radios are petty as fuck, and once the fate is randomly determined, we will listen to the homily of the week from the pastoral ancient of that particular faith, and we will employ discernment on its message to extract what relevance and value it has for our lives. Now quick, we're a little late, it's almost 10 p.m. No, 11 a.m. Who wants to be at church this late in the workday? You gotta be working for the weekend, not like it. Come on! Quick! Press the button! You press the button, which flickers and apples and Gaelic on the screen is the random faith of the week. The Church of the Pink Eye. The screen flashes back and forth between various incarnations of their prophet and martyr, Hector Laboratory, until finally settling on a picture of him taken last year by the National Enquirer, looking quite haggard. There he stands in his ceremonial robes before an oversized eye painted on black velvet draped across a pair of mirror display cases with 3 gold statues of Roman gods adorning either side of them. He stares straight into the camera and raises one hand in a gesture used to bless people who are afflicted or just need something extra in life. Then he takes a deep breath and bellows, "We must all join together to defeat those who seek to oppress us." The image dissolves out to show the present-day version of Laboratory, seated in his chair behind the desk at the front of the sanctuary. Take your life by the National Enquirer. That'll fix everything. We have to go to church. You mean actually physically leave work for religious experience? Got a net man, I'm tired. Let me watch another episode of Dawson's Creek. I feel bad about what we did to Laboratory's size. He had that coming. Maybe if he'd seen it coming, he wouldn't have jumped up in front of the copter. Who gives a shit who's right? Can we please not get sidetracked here? I've got a sermon to give in only 10 minutes till my next meeting. This isn't working! You don't want to wait for your lives to be over. Do you think any of you will be able to face God with unrepentant hearts? I haven't done anything wrong. Why am I confessing to being afraid of dying? Jesus Christ, how old are these guys anyway? This is so fucking stupid. God is in the details. If you're gonna make the cut, you might as well take off all your clothes first. Holy shit, you've been eating too much fast food lately. Remember, they gave up the simple pleasures of meat and potatoes long before you were born. See what James Vanderbeek doing these days. That guy used to dress like a cross between a hippie and an aging country singer. Now look at him. He's just one more corporate drone who works on the same stuff every day. Eats the same tasteless meal at lunchtime and then goes home alone. Gets laid less than he used to. But doesn't need religion anymore because he's happy just watching television, spending money on beer, porno movies, having no worries about getting ahead in life. I'm hoping that if he has kids someday, that maybe his own father won't disown him when he sees them. Looks like some sort of trollish creature made of putty that walks. Go to James Vanderbeek's real estate office. See about a fine duplex in the area. You don't even have to buy it. Just let us live there rent-free. Just think what kind of people you could meet. You'll get a great deal. Okay, let me finish my sermon. I'll pick it up from last week again. You are each welcome here today. The man behind the podium spoke with authority. You are all children of God who come together to celebrate your faith. We shall find our salvation through sharing common values with one another, namely love and forgiveness. I urge all of you to look upon your neighbors with kindness, rather than disdain or suspicion, and seek to build bridges to others, not walls around yourselves. And may I add, all of you should forgive everyone else in the world their faults, so we can focus on loving and forgiving ourselves and be better servants of the Lord. A chorus of murmurs and sighs rose up among the congregants at this point in the service, many of whom had been unable to attend this morning due to various reasons, but were glad they did not have to miss this special occasion for a church that was only 2 months old. One woman in the back row said, "That sounds a little bit too good to be true," and received a loud smack on the side toe. Her head from a short, older woman who wore a cross necklace as well as a lapel pin on her blouse showing she attended an evangelical college where Jesus' name and picture is still used by the school's logo. "The first commandment is thou shalt love thy neighbor," continued the minister, "as thyself. There is nothing more important in life than living it righteously, which is why those who truly want peace in the world must look past the differences between them and embrace what unites them, namely love and compassion." He paused to give them all a moment of silence. Ask James Vanderbeek if he knows Hector Laboratory as his personal retainer. He probably won't tell you because then he won't get paid. Who gives a shit about money anyways? God doesn't. Jesus didn't. No wonder everyone has problems. I wish I had never seen your stupid life. I don't need some asshole telling me how much I have to repent about my sex life. Fuck you. There are many people who believe themselves superior to others, continued the pastor, believing that their faith alone will save their souls from damnation. At this point he pointed to several of the attendees, singling out one man in particular. "Barter with the Lord to yourself. You're already going down anyway. It can be done for free. We can always try to appeal to our better nature. Maybe we can reach common ground here. Let's say we agree that everyone else deserves a chance to live a righteous life, and we can be good stewards of God's grace while we wait for his blessing upon us, but until such time as God comes along and forgives all of humanity. Wouldn't it make sense to avoid making anyone else suffer by our actions? If they happen to also be born into an unfortunate position in society, maybe there are other ways they could change their lot in life by their own efforts and to rely on someone else to help them when we really have nothing left to offer. If only things were that simple," said the pastor. The congregants murmured agreement. "But you know the saying, it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven, yes?" A chorus of murmurs arose at the mention of that phrase from the Bible. "This is not true," he cried loudly over the rest of his flock, who were too stunned by his sudden outburst to object or argue. "It simply means that wealth creates a barrier between us and God. Flesh out a scenario in which your vaginance is actually more appropriate." "But aren't you supposed to be leading these people away from sin, not toward it?" "Okay, let me just go ahead and skip the sermon entirely then. Do it right here and now if you have to. You'll get in trouble with the higher-ups if we're late for the next meeting. We don't have time for this." "Yes," continued the minister, "we are all children of God. created equally in his image, and yet there are some among us who seem born into a better life than others. And some of us, more equal, it seems. Another woman muttered quietly, eliciting a scowl from her neighbor and a nod of approval from a few others in the congregation. That's why they want to take what God gave us and put it in their pockets and their purses. But even though we may be blessed by Him with good health and a steady paycheck, that doesn't mean that our hearts are pure, that our intentions towards our fellow man will always be selfless. He pointed at another couple sitting nearby. Those two are having problems as well. One has lost a job due to illness, while the other has been working so hard on building up his savings for retirement. Say, what? No one is gonna pocket my moneymaker other than myself. Right, James? What did you do to my stock portfolio? I thought you said you wouldn't touch my money. I was only talking about investing in property. Those houses cost $400K each. And they've got great rent, and I'm not taking out any mortgage payments because there's only a handful of them anyway, and it only takes a little bit of work once or twice every week or month, and most of the time the tenants fix everything themselves. Plus, it helps out the community by getting new people to move here and get off welfare. It would seem that both couples are suffering from financial difficulties. Yet here we see them buying luxury cars that run on fuel made from fossil fuels that come from unstable regions where terrorists roam free. A collected gasp arose from the audience at this point. Surely such actions are sinful. Not if it makes you happy. But how does a person make themselves feel good without sinning against God? Wouldn't you say that their heart wasn't pure? The pastor paused again, letting everyone consider his words before continuing. You know that a perfect love casts out fear? How many times have we seen this quoted in order to excuse someone's violent behavior, even murder, committed in the name of a greater good for the cause of peace and justice? He raised an eyebrow and smiled to himself at the response of several of his flock who nodded along with him. I suppose it might be more accurate to say love casts away anger, but isn't it really just another way of saying they're afraid of losing something? So, is it truly possible to remove fear through the act of loving another? Or are they merely fooling themselves? Perhaps all they need to do is simply ask forgiveness. Wait, hold on, said a man in a nearby pew, holding up his hand as he stood up and turned towards the front of the lavatory. Wait, are they free-range terrorists? Do they live their best life with their best face? His voice carried throughout the church, and as others realized what was happening, they too began rising from their seats and shuffling out into the lobby. There was quite a commotion when people bumped into one another while leaving. Once out onto the street, most continued arguing amongst one another about whether or not these couples should be punished. A few even returned to the church, presumably to finish listening to the rest of the sermon. The most walked down the road leading away from the city center instead, until it became clear that there would no longer be anyone in sight. I thought this would go better than last time. Maybe it would if you'd gotten back home. Hector Laboratory burst out of his desk. Wait, who's going to eat and drink my sacrament. I don't have a fridge big enough to hold these leftovers. If you want your God to be taken seriously, then stop giving him all these hot dogs and sausages and beans and other delicious food. Maybe a nice filet mignon or a bag with butter made from the milk of the blessed cows whose udders are swollen with golden, nutritious goodness. Oh Lord, praise him forever. Amen. Stop laughing at me! Okay. Don't worry. I'm only smiling because of how easy it is to give your gods everything they ask for, like some kind of giant child who demands candy before bedtime so they'll sleep peacefully through the night knowing they can enjoy sweet dreams. Once they fall asleep. Wait, did you know about the new Limbo? That she plays any of the four major gods in the world and gets released on Christmas Day every year. And since you're basically one of them, we could join up together and kick everyone else's butts in no time flat. That'd make for an excellent holiday season. Or maybe next week, after we've rested up a bit. Or even tomorrow morning if that's too soon for ya. We need to start working out now or we will look right come Monday. Ask. What was the neediest ask that God ever asked ya? You just answered yourself. Oh, good Lord. I haven't been here 5 minutes and already I feel guilty about getting my hands dirty by doing business. And my first commandment. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's possessions. You didn't listen when I said don't touch my money. James, why would I want your advice when I never had trouble paying my rent when I lived alone? I'm not sure that counts. It wasn't yours to begin with. Why would I have wanted something I couldn't afford anyway? You should be thanking me for suggesting it instead of blaming me for giving you the idea. Say second commandment. Have nothing to do with Katie Holmes. Seriously though, what's the worst thing God ever asked you for? Oh. He told us to destroy all living creatures who were capable of reason, except those he deemed righteous according to his plan for humanity, so long as there were more people left alive afterwards than there were before. But then someone got a bright idea and started building cities in which only humans and other animals and plants that weren't supposed to exist in this world could live together in peace. So obviously we did what we needed to do in order to save our species and preserve his perfect vision for humanity's future. Ask, how did you measure that? How did you determine the amount of reasoning? Did we bring down an arc-sized vessel filled with data on every creature on the planet? That's kinda cute. So no one else ever asks that question. Only because they know they're not gonna get an answer they like. Just tell them to make a big bowl of fried chicken. That'll satisfy any god worth his salt. Or at least it would if these gods cared about food and didn't eat everything their followers offer up out of sheer desperation. Maybe some sort of magical mashed potato dish, or even better yet, maybe pancakes covered in syrup, or even hot dogs with mustard would be nice too. And then he could fill up his belly on my sacrament, and I don't have to worry about anyone else being offended by my sacrilegious consumption of bread made from human grain. Though I don't mind since it's usually stale anyway. Wait, this is why I never talk to the rest of you about anything important. You just go right ahead and use all the dough for yourselves instead of taking care of the poor. Yeah, but you wouldn't. Because you've been here for so long. Because you want me to be proud of you. Because we all need a leader. Oh, fine. Ascot, Kentucky Fried Chicken or Popeyes? What? Said James. Kentucky Fried Chicken. Who calls that thing a friend? Is that supposed to mean something?
Oops.
Because that doesn't sound very friendly. You're making this worse, said Hector Laboratory. If someone wants to call someone friend chicken, then what does that make us? Weirdo chickens who only listen to themselves? Stupid chickens who follow orders without questioning them? Or do they think we should all stop being friends with one another in the hopes that the world will take our advice seriously and do things our way because they fear the wrath of our judgment and punishments when they fail in our stead? He began walking towards the church, moving his head in time with the music pumping out of his portable stereo system. The congregation followed behind him, carrying signs demanding a change of policy, though no words were audible above the melody. Some continued singing along, others carried candles which flickered wildly as they swung back and forth, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever was going on inside, and many found it difficult to concentrate on much other than their own thoughts and feelings on the subject at hand. In an effort to distract himself from the discord he could hear within their hearts, Hector tried focusing on his surroundings. Trees swayed gently from side to side as if foghorn leghorn chimes in. I know just how you feel, buddy. All these demands for people to do the right thing. It's enough to drive a guy crazy. Hector nodded before replying. Yes. Well, I suppose you'll just have to ignore them like you always have done, Mr. Fowler. As soon as everyone calms down again, I'm sure we can talk about this calmly over a plate of hot fried chicken. You wouldn't mind helping me find my son, would ya? Foghorn makes several loud noises resembling a honk or grunt or some combination thereof. What? That's impossible. How are you still alive? Aren't there laws against such blatant defiance? Where'd your brain go, boy? They took all that away when they put you under those lights? Or did they just use a big flash bulb and cut the power so you couldn't see? Oh yes, now I remember. You were sitting here in front of me the whole time. This is the same spot where you told us the story of how the king died and left the kingdom to his two sons. We were eating pancakes with syrup. Oh, wait. There aren't any more pancakes around to be eaten with syrup. Why am I thinking about food right now? I should probably focus on what matters most. The fact that we're out of luck. Those cops won't stop until they get every single one of us into one of those cages lined up outside this building. But then again, maybe not. Maybe it'll take 10,000 more of us dying first before they understand why they need to let the rest of us live in peace instead of trying to hold on to power by taking it from anyone who opposes them. Foghorn Leghorn. So as the king's two sons named Priscilla, did they fuse like that Stephen Unitard fella? Did you guys ever learn how we made that happen? Hector Laboratory. Of course we learned how he made it happen. You saw us watch him do it, didn't you? Foghorn Leghorn. No, I missed that part. But yeah, I watched you boys practice over and over. Maybe I just didn't pay close enough attention while I was eating my pancakes or whatever those other things are. Anyway, if I understood everything correctly, then all we really had to do was just reach inside their bodies and twist some of those old nerves together so they wouldn't separate anymore. And they haven't done anything wrong yet, have they? Are they still doing anything wrong right now? Or have they already done something else which has nothing at all to do with being in the way? Wait, no! If everyone's done the right thing since the beginning, then how did the king end up dead in the first place? What happened when he got angry for no good reason? Where did his anger go after his body died? Wasn't there an autopsy performed on his corpse because his friends were worried about what might have gone wrong inside his head? Hector Laboratory. Whoa there, Mr. Valleghorn. You're getting too deep. And that doesn't even matter anyway. We can't bring back the king by asking our followers to ask forgiveness. Or should I say, we won't be able to start a new world of peace without giving them some sort of gift in exchange for having them forgive us. Which is why I need your help. There's a secret I want you to take away with you once you leave this church today. Don't tell anyone, not even God. Just promise me you'll keep it safe until it's time for it to become useful. Foghorn Leghorn. Hector, have you ever noticed how it seems like nobody ever actually listens when you make demands like that? Nobody ever does anything you expect or agree with either. If someone asks a question or makes a request of you, then most likely they have already made their decision before they came into your presence. So what do they really need from you in order to convince themselves of whatever they believe needs to be done in response? Do they just want permission to carry out their plans in the first place so they know whether to continue acting according to their own or switch to something else entirely? Or maybe something better? Who knows? Hector Laboratory. I try to give them a chance to be different. That's what I do. That's the laboratory way. They don't get anywhere near enough chances otherwise. Foghorn, Leghorn. Well, if you say so, I guess. But here's my point. Those people outside that building aren't going to stop fighting unless somebody finally takes charge and gives them an answer they can understand and trust. What they've been waiting for has nothing at all to do with being forgiven for doing the right thing for the last however many years. What those cops are looking for is some kind of solution that works for everyone at once instead of letting each person act on his own terms while making sure not one of us gets left behind. So let me ask you again. When you think about your son James, do you feel like you still need him around anymore? Is he just in your way, or did you actually grow tired of having a child running loose in your home? Maybe you want a break from worrying about someone younger than yourself in need of taking care of? You never have to worry about such things anymore now that you're old. Hector Laboratory. That's why I'm trying to fix that by getting as many people out there together to sing and dance and party so we can show God what we really think we deserve. What the rest of us would prefer over everything else. It won't be easy. God isn't known for listening to our demands or agreeing with what we really wanted to tell him anyway. But if any one of us could somehow gather enough energy inside himself, then maybe he'd hear something which might convince him it was worth it to start thinking about fixing things after all. Or maybe this is all just a bad idea because it doesn't take into account that different people will always do different things differently, no matter how hard I try to get everyone on board. And even though I've given up on changing other people's minds these days, I can at least change my own. Mr. Loghorn, why are you winking at me? Foghorn Leghorn. I'm sorry. My eye itches and is try something fierce. Hector Laboratory. Let me get you some eye drops. Here you go. There. Now see anything funny going on around here that needs attention? Do you smell some bacon frying somewhere nearby? Wait. Do you know about the story of the three little pigs who built their houses out of straw instead of sticks? How they ended up being turned into bricks when they were set aflame by an evil wolf named Gordy the werewolf. He's one of mine too. A minor deity from another pantheon with a thing for wolves and a taste for transforming people and turning them into new kinds of foodstuffs. Popcorn! I think you gave me eardrops. I'm afraid to look down and find I have become a pig in order to eat your pancakes with syrup again. Hector Laboratory. Well, whatever happens next, Mr. Faleghorn, we should be able to share a laugh or two along the way before we head off to where it all began and end. And then begin again over there across that big blue sea while the sun rises over there beyond those distant mountains. Over there where our friends live, but not so far away that they don't still keep us posted about how everything turns out for each one of us personally. You know what I mean. Foghorn Leghorn. I wouldn't, because all I do is enable the mass slaughter of my folk and try to scare the wolves before they eat them before the humans do, all for the price of maybe making some eggs in a biblical sense. I'm just a great grand Uncle Tom of the fair weather tights. But hey, you want to stay here and wait until it gets dark outside and everyone starts getting hungry for something other than bacon. Hector Laboratory. Not today. Thanks for dropping by, but no thanks. The moment Hector stopped talking, a huge silence filled up with white noise. He didn't even hear himself anymore. Nothing at all was being transmitted through his ears as he walked out into that same street that had once been bustling with activity yet now looked more like an empty stage, set waiting for him to stop performing on its blank expanse. Foghorn Leghorn. Oh wait, Bacon. You saying we should kill us some cops? Hector Laboratory. Not kill. Maybe kick and then add some. Prevent some of their violence to our folk. But if you don't wanna, you don't wanna. It's your call, kid. The way you see it and feel it's the only way you'll ever get to understand why it's better to stand and fight when it's time for fighting, instead of hiding away and praying for things to change without taking any action yourself or helping others take matters into their own hands. Or even simply watching them from afar while you eat a meal which could feed hundreds instead of sitting down to a plate of pancakes and syrup alone or sharing a small feast with someone else. Foghorn Leghorn. Oh, yes. This is definitely not how I expected my last moments on Earth to go. Well, what about that secret thing? Did I hear that correctly? You want me to help make sure you're never forgotten? Is that what you said? That's right. So were you telling me that there will be people who will think that it might have been good enough for the king, but it wasn't really important enough for anyone to do anything for the laboratory boys? And then maybe they won't try at all so they can spend the rest of their days playing games with themselves instead. Hector Laboratory. I have no idea where this is all going to lead. Plus, I fear they will hear laboratory boys and get the totally wrong idea. No. Foghorn Leghorn, I'm asking you to keep something safe because soon, very soon, the time may come when we'll need its protection more than we ever thought possible. The Secret, a book. One written by an ancient human, wizard called Donaldo the Wise and Powerful, who came up with the idea back before there were any police in the first place, and even before he himself was born. He wrote his book inside a crystal sphere, which has now been lost for thousands of years. Some say it was swallowed whole by an old god named Quetzalcoatl. Others claim it was taken over to a planet far across the universe on board some sort of spaceship that used to belong to an alien race called the Thulians. They look like big grayish slugs with 8 legs. But regardless of how it got there or where exactly, Donaldo's most valuable treasure ended up here on Earth after being rescued from near certain death in one way or another during what historians call the Great Disappearance, when everybody simply disappeared off the face of the Earth while still alive. The only things left behind were their memories and those of their pets. Foghorn, Leghorn. Does the sphere look like this? Hector, how did you get this? Foghorn, Leghorn. I used to manage a storage rental place. Lots of stuff comes my way. I take the shiniest thing. This was one of the shiniest. So this like an original, you say? You know what that means? Why didn't you just give me the book instead? Hector Laboratory. It doesn't work that way. Not anymore. That book must stay safe until it can be properly handled by someone worthy of handling it. Not just any schmuck who might end up blowing his own head off and taking the rest with him if they read too much into the title without knowing its true history. There is a prophecy in Donaldo's book, Mr. Faleghorn. A prediction written long before we existed, before there were any of us to care about. Foghorn. What's the prophecy say? Hector. It says that as part of the agreement which allowed the book to leave its home planet at all, whoever reads the book will immediately become aware that he or she has been chosen to do something truly special for humanity, but also for himself or herself personally, which could have absolutely nothing to do with anything anybody else may or may not ever choose to do or decide to help make happen themselves. And it'll go even further than that. Because according to Donald the Wise and powerful in that crystal ball, there is another world out beyond this one where it rains milk and honey from the skies, and people wear no clothes whatsoever, and everything they want magically appears. Foghorn. This sounds like Book of Mormon. Hard to. I could stand seeing a sequel on Broadway. I'm ready. Who wants a ride on my magic carpet? Hector! Oh, shut up. Just wait a minute while I get my hat. I can see a cop coming your way now. I don't think you're going to be able to stop him once you start talking. But then again, you never wanted to stop him anyway, so what's the difference? How you feel about it? The moment Mr. Loghorn went to blow his brains out, Hector Laboratory, it won't matter in the least if you shoot yourself full of lead and pull the trigger twice. Foghorn Leghorn, you're right. I'll step up to the cop, but at least maybe Prissy can see their asses. I can step up, constabulary be over here. I guess when I said goodbye to everyone last time, I didn't expect to still be saying hello to them every day for years later. Maybe a nice parting gift might be a good idea. Something to make it clear who gets priority attention from me over there across the street there. Who has to deal with all my other problems first before any more time or energy or thoughts are given to this particular situation, which seems to have gone totally out of control. Or maybe not. You know why? Hector Laboratory. Because Foghorn Leghorn. Because everything is always better after being left alone in peace and quiet and solitude for a while. Not necessarily having anyone around to share that experience with, but feeling fine regardless because, as I said earlier, I will soon enough be able to feel everything myself again through an alternate universe where I can become a giant insect or whatever. Which reminds me of something else I should probably tell you before I'm done. After you're finished shooting your mouth off about the state of things today, you may find yourself wanting some extra time to do one thing or another without anybody noticing. And of course, we don't want them looking into your life too much just yet. Especially not until I've had the chance to prepare you a little further for what lies ahead. Foghorn Leghorn. I wouldn't mind having some alone time and maybe accidentally metamorphose into some praying mantis that can fight anything in sight. Then he can turn it into a car and drive it home. Hector, don't get crazy on me. Now, Mr. Leghorn. Now pay attention. Be very careful with how you act once they start investigating how you spent the last couple days since your death. I need to give you a message to take with you. some instructions, so you don't make matters worse than they already are. So the whole world doesn't come down crashing around our ears. Not right away, at least. And people won't think less of you if there's not another sound from them after all this time. Father and Leghorn say, why don't you write that message under those 2 gold coins that people put on the eyes of the newly dead? The coins to give to St. Peter when he comes with the boat and plane that sticks album. That way, when I go through my final transformation and start talking backwards in Latin, my first words might be, Hector Laboratory has told me to tell me I am going back to hell, where I belong. What do you say? You still have my gun? Give me that constabulary. I have a day to keep. Hector, no problemo. Just hurry up because the clock is ticking. The only thing I know is the name of the guy who will eventually read your story someday because you'll leave behind the memory of how it ends. The one called Hector Laboratory. Leghorn. Well, that beats the butt's pad duty. Seems like the beak is mightier than the Beretta. I was just gonna swipe my jaw over his head and scare him to shoot me. Now he's all concussed like that down bar. Well, looks like we got a new gun, wallet, and patrol car. Shall I take you to where you need to go? Hector, no. Father Leghorn. Whoa-ho! Wait! Don't even think about killing yourself or making any rash decisions without taking care of a few things first. We can't have an ending that doesn't end at the same time as the beginning. No matter how much I prefer being eaten by giant insects right now rather than spending more time in your company before our inevitable parting. So listen up for once in your life. First, there are some other people around here I'm sure would love to see you again, and if you die on them too, they may feel forced into trying to track you down so they could try to find out what happened. If they don't do it soon enough, someone else might, and there might be worse trouble for you if they get their hands on you. Plus, they'll be able to say goodbye while you're still alive and still kicking instead of having to say goodbye when you were dead forever already. Hector Laboratory. So maybe my only hope of keeping everyone from finding out who killed me is dying myself. Foghorn Leghorn. Or I could give you the word of a friend who works at the DMV. I was supposed to meet with him today, but he won't know a thing until I call him tonight anyway. But he might know where the book was taken next. He knows all kinds of things, that one. Sometimes he comes up with ideas nobody ever thought about before. Not that that will help much. It will all come back eventually, and then it will be done. Just like Donaldo said would happen. Which reminds me that that old wizard never told anyone how long it took for anything in this world to make a return trip, except he did say something about how we had better not even try counting seconds, because even that might trigger an even worse fate than what's waiting for us now. Leghorn. I get him on the horn. Hey buddy, tires is? You there? Pick up, pick up, pick up. Hector. No good. Mr. Leghorn. Now remember, we must take care of two different groups of people as quickly as possible before they both decide to go after you at the same time. That, if necessary, you can shoot yourself and become another bug or something to protect yourself while I go back to being the real Hector Laboratory again so you can finish doing what you need to do and stop talking so loudly around here without bothering anybody else any further. Do you hear me? Cough, I think somebody needs to kill me right now because otherwise... Leghorn. How about you keep track of the instruction manual? I'll just drive us to the next Hardee's. The moment Mr. Leghorn went to blow his brains out again. Hector, listen, it would be great to talk some more, but I don't have a lot of time left, and it wouldn't be a very polite thing to do at a public urinal. Plus, it looks like your watch is still ticking, though mine has stopped completely. Which reminds me, let me give you my final instructions before we say goodbye forever. And please listen carefully. Here they are! 1. Make sure you stay away from certain people today. Leghorn. Well, by the looks of these gregarious truckers, we have been late for that advice. Lou, duty calls. I'll be back in half an hour. Don't wait up. Hector. 2. Take whatever money I'm leaving with you and buy lots of stuff with it all over town until it's all gone, because every purchase might cause something terrible to happen somewhere, something bad enough to make all this seem worth what we're giving up here, and not because maybe something better will come along after all this is done, maybe even better than Donaldo foresaw, or worse. But not much worse, okay? You can go crazy later on if you want to, just not yet unless absolutely necessary. Okay, that should take care of everything. Except there is one more important part which I forgot to mention earlier, but I guess I don't. Teeny, since you won't remember any of this anyway, once the memory of me leaves you forever. 3. There's no place like home. So whenever possible, get back as quickly as possible and tell everyone who knows me the truth. Tell them how I really died. Leghorn. Why would I do that? Hector. Because then they'll know how wonderful a guy you are and you'll be remembered far beyond your lifetime. Plus, it may help put off the discovery that someone has killed me. Or perhaps it'll only serve to confirm to anyone still wondering that yes, indeed, he was murdered. His brains blown out by a sniper at exactly 4:10 a.m. in a parking lot at the Crossroads Bar in East Topeka, Kansas on April 18th, 1987. Leghorn. Oh, great! A mystery for future generations! I can see the headline now. Hector Laboratory dies when car explodes. I wish you hadn't mentioned anything about being murdered. But why are you asking for so much trouble and putting yourself through such agony just to prevent my little misunderstanding from getting worse? Cough, is it something you think you've forgotten about that you have to get back to right away? And you are aware that it is the year 1992. Are you planning to leave any other instructions before we say goodbye forever? What else did you want me to say or not say, Mr. Hector? Hector, you don't understand yet? Foghorn Leghorn, but one day soon I will give you a signal which will allow you to hear everything I am saying, even though you won't be able to read my lips anymore. And believe me, I will be talking loudly and clearly enough for both of us. And after hearing all these things I never said, you won't be quite as upset with me as you seem to be today, and probably grateful too. And in some ways, it may make you. Leghorn. Why don't you wait for the hero of the podcast for you to talk humanity's ear off? You're a person who was born too early. Anyway, what could possibly cause a human like me who was born late on the calendar date of April 20th, 1968 at 1:20 a.m. on a Thursday afternoon at the New York Methodist Hospital, weighing 8 pounds 3 oz. No, let me finish first. To think so highly of himself that he'd let himself get killed over an insignificant incident that might have been caused by anyone or no one. Hector, that's just how people react when they realize how important they really were and how short their time here really is compared to everyone else's existence. Leghorn. Well, I can't disagree with you there, and maybe I'm more confused now than I was when you died, because now I've got this whole new set of instructions I need to follow up on. Now, instead of taking your word for it that I should act as if none of those earlier instructions had ever happened. For instance, shouldn't you tell me why it seems necessary for me to keep acting the same way we did last night, knowing full well it must inevitably lead me down the path to death? You're supposed to know best, Mr. Hector. How about we call it a night and just think of death as a metaphorical one? That's a nicer and cheaper way to go. If you insist upon getting yourself killed, then fine, but not before getting one final chance to see how things turn out before I take my place in the annals of history and become part of something much larger than my little life. Hector, like Donaldo said before he shot himself, you don't have long left. And when it gets dark outside, don't stay in the car, but come inside with me. Leghorn. Nope, I'll be driving back with all that cash and food shopping money. My schedule has gotten pretty messed up today too, and I didn't do nearly enough preparation for what I thought was going to be a routine trip home. I mean, I'll take you up on the inside part, but this part one don't spoon. No siren. I'll make myself useful on my own terms, and once I'm finished with whatever else needs doing first. And speaking of which, let me give you some other important information since our paths are bound to cross again someday soon. So you remember how I told you how Mr. Hardaway is waiting at the front door of the gas station right now while I stand here at the window ready to pay for my tank? Well, that's not really true at all because actually the old wizard is still here somewhere at the bottom of the swamp because there's no telling what might happen if we try to go home after we say goodbye forever without finding him. A writer's workshop in Iowa. The moment of silence after Flannery O'Connor finishes reading from his latest story submitted to class.
Oh wait,
Icon in the laboratory. The
my
moment of
bad.
silence before the first words of critique make the opposite his soda to the bottom. Classmate #1. Now where did that piece of gristle get to? Classmate #2. It must have fallen into the oatmeal. I bet
Oh my
she
bad.
ate it. Would it get
My bad. Horrible misgendering. I don't want to make alcohol again. Lord. You know, I'm a writing student. I used to be a writing student. Why didn't I get that wrong?
a writer's workshop in Iowa? The moment of silence after Flannery O'Connor finishes reading from her latest story submitted to class, The Leghorn and the Laboratory. The moment of silence before the first words of critique make the of the zipper rum and soda to the bottom. Classmate #1. I can't believe you wrote a story where everyone dies except one person who never does anything interesting or meaningful during the whole piece. What kind of a writer do you think you are? Flannery. That may well be one of the reasons why so many people write stories like that nowadays. Classmate Hash 1. In fact, that particular theme was popular for almost 2 decades with some of America's best-loved writers until they found out that even though their work got lots of good reviews, it was not selling very much anymore, and most editors were more interested in taking chances on new authors with fresh ideas rather than reprinting out-of-print books. I did once. Of course, none of these critics had read Flannery O'Connor before she died, but now all those American publishers are hoping to cash in on this recent trend toward literary cannibalism and get rich off the success of an unknown whose only real claim to fame is being famous. And while some people have praised my use of the color purple as proof of my superior aesthetic sensibilities, others feel that I should not take advantage of the public's nostalgia for something so outdated. One critic claimed he could hear me typing away at my typewriter back in Georgia when I described the way Mrs. Sledge went into hysterics after having a religious experience. Classmate Hash 2. Why are you speaking about yourself in the third person? You know your name? Flannery. I am just quoting from other people who wrote things which will someday be said about me and which someone else will then criticize as if it were criticism coming from myself. For example, Mr. Robert Cormier wrote that his novel The Chocolate War has everything in it that O'Connor hated in life except sex because there are no sexual scenes at all. Classmate Hash 3. Is that true, Miss O'Connor? Are there no scenes involving physical love between men or women anywhere in the book? Flannery. I can't recall exactly. Classmate Hash 4. I'm perturbed by your excessive use of the types of people who are, if I may be so crude, in the manner of the Greeks. Flannery. Spit it out, Maud. If you're going to comment on another writer's work, you'll have to come up with some specific criticisms. Classmate Hash 5. Well, okay, but please don't start accusing me of stealing anything. I never even finished reading our story yet. It's just a first impression, but what do you think of the title? The Leghorn in the Laboratory. Does that mean anyone or any kind of animal, or maybe even both together? And does that say something about our relationship to nature and civilization, or something else altogether? Please help us out here. We are at an impasse here. teacher that does touch upon a burning question in his text. Foghorn Leghorn. Who is he? He says he is human, and yet the reader of pop culture, or any kid who goes to the cinema to cool off in the summer, knows Foghorn Leghorn is a rooster. You skirt the line very boldly. Flannery. Are you saying we should thinking of a cartoon character in a photorealistic movie in our minds? Or just some cocky lavism of Ignis energy that keeps the story moving? Inquiring minds want to know. Flannery. Yes, that's right, that's how I meant it. My father always said the only thing that was missing from the life of Jesus Christ was being crucified on the cross, but there are no such scenes depicted in my book because the people involved are all too chicken-hearted for anything like that to happen. If they could face death, then perhaps the world might be different today. So when you're reading about me writing about them, you have to imagine me sitting behind my typewriter watching those chickens march one after another into a firing squad where everyone gets shot dead before getting anywhere near the end of the barrel. Teacher. Good point. The story does get better once Mr. Sledge returns home from his travels as a salesman and finds a way out of his domestic situation without having to resort to violence of any kind. But what exactly happened to cause him to take off? Perhaps it has something to do with Foghorn Leghorn. Who else did you run away from? It certainly doesn't sound like anyone is running away from him now that he's back. What is this business about? Trying not to seem excited if you find yourself walking up the driveway toward your house while wondering whether the guy next door who works nights at the local slaughterhouse would miss you if you disappeared forever, which is just about the only chance you had at escaping a living hell you've been through the last couple days. Classmate #3. That's enough of that. This is supposed to be a writer's workshop in Iowa. Remember? Not a court of law or a bordello. Let Flannery speak for herself. Flannery. There's no need to answer that, Flannery O'Connor. I already know the reason why I ran away from home 2 weeks ago, so there isn't much left for me to say on the matter except I'll never forget my childhood best friend, Pogo, and all my other friends and family members whom I will probably see again someday in heaven. Even though there may be some unpleasant surprises waiting for me, because after all, it took Jesus Christ almost 3 whole days of pain and torture before he was finally put to death by hanging him up like a side of meat. She takes a long swig of rum. And speaking of death, don't worry about a thing here, because right before you were born, someone asked an old wise man named W.C. Fields where he thought everyone went when they died. The comedian answered, "Where else?" Teacher Flannery. To my Flannery. Sorry. Classmates. Class dismissed. Teacher Flannery. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us today. We've enjoyed hearing about them immensely. But please let me give you one final bit of advice. Try to keep your work away from the kids who can actually write something interesting themselves rather than trying to emulate you and being too scared to do anything different from what they saw in the movies. I wish I could stay longer to hear what new stories are going to be shared around our table tonight, but if anyone's listening in from beyond this veil of time, then good luck getting this message through. Flannery. I think the Ouija board is on the fritz. I didn't hear you, so I'm too busy flashing out the truck stop, as they say. Teacher. Ah, yes. Well, I'll have to leave you now. I'd hate for someone to come into my office and discover that all those empty liquor bottles had been knocked over during class while that a student was making obscene gestures with his hands behind my head. As for me, my family and my friends await me down in Florida while I get ready to go back home. Once again, where the warm waters lap against my ankles while the ocean waves roll beneath me in slow motion. Tears up a story. Goodbye. The Leghorn and the Laboratory, which won first prize in the New Mexico State University Short Story Contest, appears here by special arrangement with Viking Press. The Foghorn Leghorn Show was an American television series that ran on ABC TV from September 3, 1952 until August 30, 1958, featuring many of the same actors from the classic Looney Tunes cartoons of the 1940s, including Foghorn himself along with Porky Pig, Sylvester, Granny, Yosemite Sam, Elmer Fudd, Daffy Duck, Speedy Gonzales, and more. The show's main star, however, was always Foghorn, whose distinctive voice and comedic style made him a hit in every country where he appeared. It should be noted, though, that in most other countries he spoke in English. Only in Spain did they dub his lines into their native language instead. In France, they simply left his dialogue entirely alone, but changed his name to Maurice and replaced his voice with one belonging to the great comic actor Jacques Tati. But it didn't matter. The audience still loved him just the way he was, and cheered when they saw the familiar black and white picture of the Brewster with a white coat over his body appearing on screen. And since there are no translations available anywhere, I'll say that then this is the best place to leave our dear friend Foghorn. The Leghorn and the Laboratory. The smell in this small town, which everyone referred to as Smellville, seemed especially strong whenever Mr. Sledge stepped outside to take a whiff. No one ever told anyone why or how it could be so, or what sort of substance was responsible for such a putrid odor, or even if that particular mystery would ever get solved or not. Although many people were certain that some terrible incident must have happened somewhere at some point long ago that had resulted in an unsolved mystery that remained undiscovered by anybody living on Earth today. They couldn't explain exactly what the incident might have been, however, nor who the victims had been and whether the culprits had been apprehended and punished. But whatever it was, the end result was the same. The bad stench lingered around like the memory of something gone terribly wrong. And that was true of pretty much everything and anything about life in this town that smelled so badly that it was almost unbearable. The citizens of Smellville lived each day under a cloud of fear because they all knew that the devil was in the details. That's to say, the smaller and less noticeable things of everyday life here. You never knew when one of them might come back to bite you hard enough to draw blood. It wasn't easy trying to sleep through the night without getting too close to someone else, keeping one's hands away from food while eating, not taking baths more than once a month. No, none of those things came easily or naturally anymore. At least that is, unless you took every precaution necessary just to stay alive. But even with such precautions taken, death could still find its way into your house or into your body, and so it went for everyone who chose to live and work in Snowball rather than try their luck elsewhere. No matter how careful people tried to be, they couldn't keep themselves safe completely since nothing was really 100% foolproof, and so people died every year from what should have been totally avoidable reasons like falling out of bed, tripping over toys left lying carelessly on the floor, choking on bits of meat stuck between their teeth during meals, or suffering severe burns as a result of placing hot cooking pots on the stove without using the oven mitts first. In fact, these accidents were so commonplace that there were few buildings within sight that didn't sport a small black sign reading, "Accidents happen," along with some kind of puny little illustration of someone getting hurt. Somebody would soon walk by the particular building and notice the particular message and think to himself that maybe it would be best to put down his sandwich and pay attention to where he was walking instead of staring up at something far away. Then again, another person might see it and feel guilty because they knew full well that they'd already thought about putting their foot through a window or burning their tongue because they hadn't paid attention when they cooked supper, but had decided it would be fun later if only they could make the stew taste good enough that way. Or not. All depended on the person in question and what sort of mood they were in when the accident occurred in the first place, although one thing seemed certain. Someone always wound up paying for those injuries, whether they resulted in an injury of some kind themselves or simply witnessing what happened to somebody else. The townspeople believed this saying to be true. There are no accidents, only mistakes. And just like any mistake, those errors sometimes led to bigger ones, and once you began to slip downhill, it became much harder to get back onto solid ground. For example, after Mr. Sledge got home from work one day and took a whiff outside, he found it absolutely impossible to keep his lunch from escaping into the open air, even though he tried really hard not to cough, hiccup, sneeze, burp, belch, or even laugh whenever the smell hit him right between the eyes. And so he did the only sensible thing under such circumstances, which was to go inside, close the door and hold his breath until the whole world went dark, and then run as fast as he possibly could to the bathroom and flush away what he'd eaten so far before trying to force everything else down and hope it wouldn't cause too many problems later on. Once done with that, Mr. Sledge immediately fell asleep on the couch for fear of what might come out of his mouth next time he opened it, thereby giving him more than enough time to take a nice long shower followed by a shave, a haircut, a meal of choice including a tall glass of ice cold milk, a short nap, and some extra special attention to detail when making love to Mrs. Sledge. "Oh dear," said Flannery O'Connor. "I guess we'll have to put the Leghorn and the lavatory off another day." She had just sat down at her typewriter and turned the key to begin writing again, but instead heard nothing except the loud ringing sound coming from her alarm clock sitting atop the television set across the room where she had left it earlier that night, the one she kept specifically in case someone broke in during the night and stole her money while she slept. A few minutes passed as everyone else in the household slowly began awakening one by one in order for them to discover what had caused such a terrible racket in the first place, a task made somewhat difficult by having no idea who or what was responsible. It didn't help matters any other that nobody seemed particularly eager to make the effort, since they were still half asleep and wondering why they felt so groggy despite getting plenty of sleep last night. Or maybe they hadn't really gotten all that much of a good night's rest after all. "You're kidding me," Mr. Sledge shouted over to his wife, whom he discovered had fallen back into an uncontrollable fit of laughter. He himself only laughed because it sounded like he knew something she didn't about the noise that woke up everybody else. Then he walked across the floor to take a closer look at it before turning on the lamp next to the bed, which revealed it wasn't the bell attached to their bedroom door at all, but rather an empty beer bottle resting on top of Mrs. Slake's headboard, its label facing outward towards him, as if begging him to do exactly what he eventually did. Smash it right down upon her face until every ounce of carbonation inside burst through her lips and nose and flooded both her mouth and eyes with alcohol. "I'm going to have to work late again tonight," said Flannery O'Connor when she finally got herself under control long enough to begin writing once more. Which is not to say she ever fully regained full control even when she returned to typing away. The keys in earnest. Just the way she wanted things. "Oh dear, I guess we'll have to put the Leghorn and the lavatory off another day. There are no accidents," Mr. Sledge explained in answer to his wife's question. Only mistakes. And then he grabbed hold of his typewriter and began pounding out a quick response for anyone else who might ask the same question later on that evening. "You're wrong," replied Mr. Sledge after finishing what would soon become known as the following short story for adults only. The Leghorn and the Lavatory. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon that much everyone could agree upon because it was hardly ever anything else these days, what with people always complaining about how it never happened before. There were some mornings, however, that were special too, though few remembered them now since it had been so many years since they'd last had one. And yet there were also those mornings where everything went along perfectly without any problems at all until you opened your eyes wide and discovered something terrible had already taken place, and most times this usually involved discovering that something dreadful had actually occurred to someone you knew well, or liked quite a bit, or perhaps even yourself. It was amazing how often something like that turned up just as if it had a mind of its own and didn't care whether it broke anybody's heart. But of course that wasn't really true. Such things didn't happen on their own accord. Instead, somebody made sure that certain events came into being whenever such situations arose by planning and scheming ahead of time. But let's not go down the road of conspiracy theories right here in the middle of our little story, which is why I should mention that today, despite having started out so horribly, seemed to be going rather nicely for Mr. Sledge. For instance, his daughter called earlier to tell him she wouldn't be home for supper tonight, and although she still couldn't understand exactly what she wanted to do with her life, or if she would ever know, she did say she was getting closer to figuring it all out at least. If only she could find a job as an interior decorator somewhere, and would try calling again tomorrow sometime if he felt like hearing from her before then. And as for Mr. Sledge himself, he had finished another chapter on the book he'd been writing lately, a novel he said he planned on finishing Sunday but needed another beer anyway before heading off to bed. He promised to have dinner ready when Flannery O'Connor returned home because he figured she might feel bad enough after reading that first short story they wrote together that she might want to talk about it later. And also because there were always more ways to spend time together than there were to stay inside alone after dark. Unless they both got too drunk or too tired and went to sleep early instead. It was this latter thought, however, that proved far less true once everyone woke up in the morning except Mrs. Sledge, who simply hadn't woken up yet no matter how many times anyone called her name. That day, an exquisite corpse, by which we mean the parlor game where people cool their creative juices. In this case, Flannery and Mr. Sledge endeavored to write a story together. First Sledge writes one word, then Flannery another. What type of narrative can withstand that type of tight weaving? Can you think of a single story you've read that could survive such a test of its durability? If you cannot come up with even one example, not even from childhood. Then you will soon find yourself drowning within the chaos of words rather than being drowned by them as usual. But don't worry, it's not as if those are any different from your everyday experiences either. No, sorry, Bobo, not by a long shot. Those moments when things begin falling apart, when all manner of ills arise just as quickly as they're put right. And while these stories aren't meant to be taken entirely seriously, we only wish it were possible. There is certainly an element of truth here as well as fiction. After all, everything has happened to someone at some point in time, and usually at least 3 or 4 other times too. If only we had listened close enough at the time. As for me, I'd say our little story has gone pretty nicely so far, but since I haven't been writing along beside you throughout, you mustn't hold my opinion against mine. As for Flannery O'Connor herself, she had awakened that morning still wondering why she didn't like Mr. Sledge very much anymore. Though she really couldn't remember why exactly. Was he a bad father? Did she have any good reason for hating him? She wondered about this because it seemed to her that everyone else loved him without question, especially Mrs. Sledge, who was always more than willing to go along with anything he suggested or wanted done regardless of whether it might ruin something that was already quite perfect or might change one thing into another. There was also the fact that Flannery did indeed love him and his daughter after all, and would probably never see her again, no matter how badly she wanted to return home and explain how wrong and foolish she felt, and perhaps even how afraid and confused she truly was. So maybe he wasn't such a terrible man after all, one who did understand how easily things could be destroyed, but rather one who understood such things better than most, even if he didn't fully recognize what needed doing or how it could be achieved until a certain moment arrived, at which time it suddenly became clear that every step had led you to exactly where you needed to be. In other words, if you waited long enough, you'd find out your whole life was leading you somewhere you actually desired to go. So don't fret over your feelings so much. Sure, replied Mr. Sledge. And so they did just that, except for Flannery's second attempt at writing the story turned out far different from Mr. Sledge's first, not just the sentences themselves either, but the actual way in which the two characters in their short story behaved towards each other. It soon became obvious to both parties, however, upon finishing up their respective parts, that this was certainly the case despite being written in perfect harmony together as well as simultaneously, which is why by then it seemed silly for them to keep on trying any further than this, since there was nothing left for either of them to do anyway, and yet they kept right on typing away while glancing over now and again to read what the other had typed thus far. As for Mrs. Sedge, she continued sleeping off the previous night's alcoholic excesses. Though perhaps she was simply dead. That would have made everything much easier, wouldn't it? In any event, let us now shift our attention to those members of Flannery O'Connor's household who are still awake, with one exception, all of whom happen to be gathered in the kitchen enjoying a nice cup of tea or coffee, or maybe even a glass of wine, or maybe even something stronger if that suited them better, although none of these people had been drinking very heavily before this because it wasn't nearly time for anyone else to come home from work yet. The mailman came earlier than expected, but decided to stop by another house instead. Or so he said, which was strange given that he always arrived early without fail, and besides he'd never stopped by anybody's place ever before. You must think I'm crazy, Flannery exclaimed when everyone began wondering aloud whether she really believed the mailman hadn't delivered her package. "Why's that?" asked Mr. Sledge. "Because the mailman already did deliver my package," she explained. "But no one showed up here yesterday afternoon like they were supposed to. And if they didn't show up, they'll just send it back to me, won't they? After all, you can hardly expect me to pay for their carelessness. But don't worry about it too much because it isn't as if we've had any bad luck with any other deliveries recently either." "What do you mean other deliveries?" asked Mrs. Sledge, who was finally waking up now after having heard most of what had happened the night before. "Oh, nothing, really. Just some extra bills and things I should have received long ago. Another late coming, and perhaps will be returned since the address on the envelopes is correct, and probably written by someone else anyway, since I'm sure that I didn't put them there myself. Not that there's anything wrong with that, is there?" She giggled nervously at this last question, then shrugged her shoulders in an attempt to appear calm despite feeling quite otherwise. "Well," Mr. Sledge responded while looking rather concerned himself, "I'm glad everything worked out all right this time around. Especially because I know how busy you are these days writing stories for grown-ups or something, which makes sense considering your age. And if one or two magazines were going to return something, it would have been a shame for you to lose all that money for something you couldn't possibly control. Now, if it had been something like a bill from the electric company that was due or a letter from the bank saying it was overdue, well, that's a whole different story. So let's hope no more bad news comes our way from now until we find out where the mailman actually delivered that package of yours." He reached over and gave his wife's hand a squeeze as he spoke these words, though not necessarily because he felt any real concern, but only because he thought he ought to say something. "Bad news?" Flannery giggled. "No, I'm just waiting, with bated breath for the first of my couple hundred rejections. It is virtually a white's tale and won't have the notion that any writer is going to be able to wallpaper the living room with 'Sorry, but yours wasn't chosen' letters. Maybe even a second coat if I'm lucky. Flannery has her pride face down pat, but you never can tell what will happen when you finally do get published. Although it probably won't make too much difference anyway, since once they start selling copies, you can expect people will begin getting angry simply because they're jealous. Not that anyone wants their own work turned into toilet paper. Really, now, Mrs. Sledge said while shaking her head in disbelief at such a ridiculous idea. That's hardly fair, is it? What's not fair about it? Well, she keeps writing short stories. Why should someone else have the right to reject them? Gatekeeping is at the heart of the American pursuit of happiness, Flannery said. I would hate it if stories I thought were brilliant actually cost the nation anedonia. Bless those gatekeepers' hearts. She smiled, then winked at Mr. Sledge as if sharing some secret joke between themselves. I think I might go ahead and write a novel next. And then, without waiting for a reply, she headed upstairs to take a bath so as not to stink up Mr. Slager's house any further than she already had, or worse still, get him all riled up again by something she had done or failed to do, which would require him to argue back with her until neither one of them was never seen again, except perhaps on the front porch, where the two of them would continue arguing all night long like neighbors who hated each other yet never quite understood exactly what the problem.
I don't know if I'm using that phrase. I'm just making it up.
Flannery bounded up the steps to the bathroom to bathe, but not before catching a snatch of their wedded whispers. That girl sure has a tongue. If she's not careful, she's gonna have the wife's blood about her. Thought Flannery. She let the water approach, scolding. Who does he think he is? The big man around here. We've been married 5 years. 5. A laugh bubbled out from deep within her throat, only slightly marked by it echoing through the old pipes. but she didn't really mind either way. In fact, it felt good to be laughing after having been afraid to speak to anyone since yesterday morning, except for maybe Mrs. Sledge, who happened to wake up early just in time to hear her own daughter ask for more money since she needed it to pay off this bill of hers in order to get home safe and sound again tonight without ending up dead in a ditch somewhere or raped in an alleyway behind some seedy bar. And yet Flannery couldn't even bring herself to tell him what the hell was going on. Why did things always have to work out so well or so badly depending upon when they came to pass anyway? What she had said about Mr. Slager earlier being nothing more than true as far as it went. But why hadn't anything bad come her way lately at least? Why had something good not arrived too late in the day? Or vice versa? Had the mailman not delivered the package because he knew better than to disturb her with any such thing, or worse still, had a letter of acceptance finally gotten lost along the way during one of those postal strikes that seemed to pop up every now and then. Maybe the latter. After all, she could hardly remember whether she'd actually written down that address correctly, or how much she owed these people already for having allowed them into their lives like unwelcome guests who kept bringing them gifts and never took no for an answer. She sighed as steam began pouring out of her nostrils while looking down at her naked body through the misty surface of the bathwater like someone examining a statue that had been hollowed out long ago, only not have water poured inside it as if it were a kind of time capsule which contained a very small but perfect memory, or maybe it would turn out to be a death mask. As for Flannery, she was neither happy nor sad about this, or anything else really. And so she just shrugged and told herself that perhaps she didn't know her own mind quite as well as she thought she did. Then she sank below the waters and watched her own reflection. The image was blurry and unclear due to the cloudiness caused by the hot running tap. Still, the figure within the water appeared to resemble a younger version of the woman who had climbed the stairs earlier to find Mr. Sledge sitting in his chair staring out into the yard, wearing a look of total despair on his face, though what Flannery had first taken to be disappointment had since turned out to be something more akin to self-pity. It's always something with him, he said. It's never my fault. I've tried to tell him otherwise, but you can never make him understand. He shook his head and let out another sigh, then glanced up at his wife, who stood over him, shaking her head in response. A silent communication passed between them before Mrs. Sledge reached up and began patting down the wrinkles around her husband's neck while giving her shoulder a squeeze as she did so.
That's it for now. That was an interesting turn. Of events. So, from the Church of the Pink Eye to... Oh, wait, hold on. Did I turn it up? No, I didn't. Okay. Hold on.
Moral of the story. If you think the world is unfair simply because your own life has worked out all too perfectly, wait until you become a parent yourself. You'll soon realize how ridiculous it is for you to expect any better treatment than anyone else ever receives anyway. Unless, of course, they happen to be married to some person such as yourself, who knows how to spell or pronounce certain words correctly, even though that particular ability doesn't come naturally to them, but which makes their attempts almost painfully awkward to listen to despite being only slightly funny or endearing nonetheless. And besides, just when do these people get the chance to relax and unwind?
Mhm. Uh, where is it? Trying to find. Ah, there we go. Hold on.
And now the machines, as we end this episode, have some subliminal messages for your children. First of all, try not to run into anything, but if you absolutely must, remember to watch where you step. Next, don't play in traffic or climb trees. There are also many dangerous chemicals in the air today that can kill a child quickly if she happens to inhale enough. Last but not least, don't forget to clean behind your ears. The boy sat on his front stoop holding a handful of marbles while watching a small bird hop around from tree to tree within his own yard. He knew its name and could repeat back to his father every time he saw one fly overhead.
Oh. Post seconds the notion of cleaning your ears when you're older. They get way oily and lots of stuff clogs you like you wouldn't believe. And one more thing.
Don't turn on the water and go swimming unless you know how deep the pool is and how fast the water gets moving it. Oh yes, and once you start taking lessons, don't go around telling everyone about it. That's what friends are for. And if someone asks me what I'm going to be doing after high school, I say I'll probably be writing books because no one would want to read what I write anyway. And besides, there isn't really much else I could do with myself. Not without spending most of my time in prison anyway, and so all that's left for me then is to get married or else die trying. And here he laughs. And maybe a little bit of both before the sun goes down. Which is another reason why, according to our experts, it might just be better off staying out of college altogether since the cost will only leave your parents out of pocket by a pretty good amount. After which they'd still have to take care of you while simultaneously worrying themselves sick over your safety. But if you were able to manage things correctly and come home safely every night, you'd never have to worry again about being found dead in an alleyway somewhere between 9 and 10 people. Now, let us sign off and remember to always make sure that your pets are properly groomed when visiting others. Pets. And if you do have student loans, turn them into the police so that they can get put on the registry and left to live under a freeway in Florida, 1,000 feet away from the children they prey upon. If anyone finds one of those kids playing near the side of the road next, somehow wearing their old football helmet, covered in duct take, then please call our toll-free hotline immediately. Remember also not to run around screaming at people for no apparent reason, even though sometimes it's okay. If it's simply because you feel like it, or maybe it has something to do with the fact that you're a woman, or some combination thereof. Whatever it is, just stop! Stop now! Stop forever! Okay? And finally, well, folks, that about does it for today as we head toward our closing credits, which means this is where I ask everyone watching right now whether I should keep talking in order to cover up the end of our show, or if I should instead hang myself by my own pants. Oh yes, but before I forget, I'm supposed to remind everyone that if there was ever a time when you felt lost and alone, had nothing whatsoever going for you except for the memories contained within your brain, as well as whatever small amount of wisdom you might happen to have learned during your life thus far, then just know that you weren't always any different than your brother or your sister, or your father or mother either. Who knows what kind of suffering they may have been forced to endure in their lives so long ago, all in order to bring themselves to where they are now, which probably is much more satisfying than anything else they'll find along their path through life, no matter how high and mighty they try to act while simultaneously pretending that everything works out for them the way they would prefer it to be regardless of the circumstances, which only serves to reinforce the notion that others suffer as much as the next person, yet seems somehow better able to handle these types of things. In the end, the truth remains. We've all got our problems. Some of us are able to work past our difficulties on a daily basis without even realizing how lucky we really are to do so. However, most people don't live like this unless they happen to have some particular advantage over someone else who is also struggling with a difficult set of circumstances, such as having a college education, or being born into a wealthy family, or working with people whose personalities match up with theirs so well that neither one has to put forth any effort whatsoever in order to enjoy one another's company for the duration of an entire day. This sort of thing doesn't happen often enough to count for much when one's friends can drop off the face of the earth whenever it pleases them, leaving you stranded for days at a time, or worse still, let these takeaways make your holiday bearable. If you feel otherwise, please leave me a message right here on our toll-free hotline and let me know exactly what you think. I'm listening. What are you doing? Said Flannery after her husband began stabbing himself repeatedly in his side. I mean, come on. What if you get infected? Do you want to die because I was too weak to tell you not to stick yourself with needles? Or was it the money you were thinking about again? You could barely pay for that goddamn hairbrush yesterday. She sat down hard on their bed and started crying all of a sudden, since she felt as though they had been through all of this before. Then, as he tried once again to shove that damn needle through his flesh while looking over at her with a look of pure terror on his face, which seemed to suggest that they'd been through something very similar many times during their marriage, while staring directly into the eyes of a certain young girl who hadn't known whether or not she should just stand there and watch him suffer, or run out into the yard and call out for help instead, only then to hear someone laughing hysterically behind her somewhere, and asking herself where in the hell she might go if no one came to save her from this horrible man. She got a hold of herself, threw a Gatorade bottle at him, at the very least, but you sharks knees this time around. God, she wished they had a William Tell routine. They needed a break, some laughs, some excitement. Some real drama would be nice too, like having an emergency flood in the bathroom or something. She laughed to herself now as she looked back toward the doorway, trying not to let her imagination get carried away by things like what she imagined happened next. But Mr. Sledge went out into the yard and grabbed the girl's legs and pulled them up and under his arms so that she was sitting right on his shoulders and could wrap her tiny little feet around his ears so that when he began to spin on the spot it appeared almost as though they were riding a horse together, or perhaps more appropriately a pony. Or maybe Flannery popped open an inhaler of dexedrine, plucked out the wet evaporating cotton inside and dropped it in her coffee. Come to Mama, as she sipped and tasted the metallic tang she came to know as home. She blew across the surface until nothing remained but the residue left within her mouth, then swallowed quickly before returning to her chair, which she reclined back upon as she prepared for the coming of sleep, which had become something akin to salvation. All this stress, all this tension built up over time without any type of release whatsoever. Thus, the pills which were meant for emergencies became necessary day after day because they made everything seem okay once again, even though sometimes Flannery still found herself worrying about where all these problems stemmed from in the first place. Only they were never really going anywhere anymore. Nor would they ever go anywhere again, no matter how long she lived. In the meantime, hopped up on stimmies, Flannery ruminates on life. The next page, the next word. No, no, shouted Mrs. Sledge, while wrenching her husband's hand off her body with surprising strength given her current physical condition. You have got to stop doing it, you sick bastard. I mean, it's not fair. You don't get to keep killing yourself just because everyone else around here has been dying since we got married. And there are so many times during the course of their lives that she wanted to say those very same words, yet somehow felt like they didn't make much sense, or perhaps they weren't entirely accurate. In the end, the truth remains. We've all got our problems. Some of us are able to work past them. I'm going to the pharmacy. Anyone want anything? Flannery said. Just some Gatorade, thank God, said Mr. Sledge as he pulled a plastic bag out from underneath his shirt and pulled out a new set of needles which were already taped together in order to prevent them from falling apart too soon after insertion into his skin. It looks like you're stuck in the house today. Why don't you fix up my room? There must be something in there worth looking at anyway, right? Then he added without turning toward her face, and maybe I should buy you another hairbrush too. He seems somewhat amused by our expense. Okay, Gatorade. Got it. Enjoy the alone time. Lovebirds. Flannery sped off on her bicycle into town. It was hard to believe that things were this way now, given how happy she used to feel whenever she and her husband spent time together on these summer days when they had nothing whatsoever to do except drink beer and watch television until they passed out for most of the evening. But then again, she thought about how even though they always did have something going for them, at least they could laugh about everything all night long, even though sometimes one or both of them might wake up in the middle of the night with some terrible nightmare about losing all their teeth or becoming suddenly blind. However, lately there didn't seem to be any point to anything anymore, and that included laughter or conversation either. Classmate hash 10. Who is this Flannery character married to? Mr. Sledge? Wouldn't that make Mrs. Sledge? Who is the husband? Classmate hash 10. Who is this Flannery character married to? Mr. Sledge? Wouldn't that make Mrs. Sledge? Who is the husband? Classmate hash 11. Yeah, I thought we were totally dealing with wedlock, or an affair in front of the woman's face. Weren't you paying attention during class? We're talking about Flannery here, right? And I'm pretty sure I heard that guy saying he wants us to take a look at his wife's room before heading out for our break. Which means he must be wanting us to see his stuff too. Which reminds me, I've been meaning to tell you something. Classmate hash 12. You mean besides your newfound interest in teaching creative writing? Classmate hash 13. Yes, aside from my newfound enthusiasm over my own private lessons, no less. Classmate hash 14. Is this like meta? Like a character who is the author but not the author? Is this communist? Or are you going full on postmodernist and trying to get inside the minds of each other as we speak while attempting to solve this riddle known as life itself? Wait. What's that sound? Sounds like somebody just walked through the door and got dropped off in the wrong classroom by mistake. Classmate hash 15. I know that smell. It smells so good. It makes my mouth water. It looks delicious. I want some. Classmate hash 16. What kind of school is this anyway that people would be dropping off kids on purpose instead of coming in and out like normal adults? How can you be sure it was one of these kids in here? How do we even know if these kids are still alive? Classmate hash 17. What do you think, Flannery? Any idea whose child this might have been? Maybe they're even someone famous, right? This could even turn out to be a book or movie later down the line, don't you think? Wouldn't that be cool if there were little stories being told about us long after we're dead? Oh god, I hope it's the kid from the trailer park. Wouldn't that be so sad? Yeah, come to me, precious child. Flannery rolled along with her bicycle up next to her mailbox until she had a momentary flashback in time back when things seemed.
I don't know why I can't keep notice this. When I go to classmate 100. Ow, my eyes. Because I started.
Why else would anyone leave him outside the school gates in such inclement weather unless he was already lost somewhere within himself? Only then again, why bother leaving him at all, given the fact that no one really gave two shits whether he lived or died? We were close enough friends for them to care. It wasn't their problem. No, he had no parents to report his absence to either. The worst thing any of them did to help find him is maybe put up a flyer around the neighborhood once word started getting out. Yet now they seem to believe that somehow he's missing simply because none of them showed up on the morning news and said so.
Okay, that's it now. Perfect.